Alright, Clark, where are you now, you're asking? What is this place? Well, I'll tell you. It's the Tredegar Iron Works in Richmond, Virginia, just off of the James. It's a joint facility managed by the Park Service and also a private company that has a Civil War museum that was $8 to get through and really wasn't worth the money. But anyway, that's where I am, the Tredegar Iron Works. Here's the celebrated, or rather infamous, Abraham Lincoln and Son statue in Richmond. It's a kind of a fuss from neo-Confederates because they say, look, Lincoln conquered Richmond and laid it to waste, and is this appropriate to have this here? Well, I don't know. I think it is. I don't have a problem with it, but then I'm a Union man. Let's get a look at Abe. Not a bad likeness, I guess. And what son is this? I forget. Is it Tad or Willie, or I don't remember. This pretty riparian view is the James River at Richmond. Right now I'm standing on the footbridge which leads over to Belle Island, which was the site of a Civil War Union prison camp. This footbridge was erected in 1991 and it has these big suspension cables. Overhead, I think that's a major, that could be 95 or some other major freeway, I'm not sure. The sounds you're hearing aren't percussion or cannon, they are in fact cars going over this bridge. Off in the distance, you can see Richmond, downtown Richmond. This is the site of Belle Island prison camp. During the Civil War, there were over 1,000 Union soldiers who perished here in the 6-acre prison. Here's a plaque that's called Cannon Over the Camp. And it mentions that the Belle Isle prisoner of war camp that stood before you here was a prison without walls. Federal soldiers were confined by the James River and by the low earthen dead line, such as the one replicated in front of you. There's a berm here. About 100 Confederate guards were assigned here and were authorized to shoot any prisoner crossing the dead line. Here's an 1863 sketch. Here's a photograph. Cannon overlooking the empty camp. April 8th, 1865. And then some moron over here decided to write, refuse, resist, revolt. Okay, great. Idiot. I'm now on the site of what's called the Hollywood Rapids. And no, not California, where I'm from. The rapids to your left are named for the cemetery on the hill straight ahead. The granite rocks that cause them are a part of a geological scar that stretches 1,000 miles from New Jersey to Georgia. It resulted from the clash of the continents of Africa and North America 250 million years ago. Something a bit earlier than Civil War history. Looks like a great place to have my lunch, but I don't see a picnic table or anything like that here. That's Hollywood Cemetery across the way, by the way. Sort of like a Disneyland of cemeteries. All sorts of interesting things there. Jeff Davis is buried there, as are a number of presidents of the United States, that is. This looks like a good place to have my lunch. And so I think I will. Here's that footbridge I crossed. Belle Isle is an interesting place. There was a granite quarry here. And there's some of the rocks. Here's a shot of the outskirts of the quarry. All sorts of interesting things to see here. This is all that remains of the Belle Isle hydro plant. According to this, water ran through the metal grates ahead and into 3 large pipes. Each held a fan turbine. As the water spun the blades, the drive shaft turned the generators, producing energy. In the mid-1950s, the price of oil was so low that petroleum products became the fuel of choice. Local gasoline was only 25 cents a gallon. Had anyone foreseen the great increase in costs after the Arab oil embargo in 1967, this plant might have remained competitive. I'm now on what's known as the John Smith Trail. And I'm under a big railroad bridge. And this railroad bridge, as it turns out, has a claim to fame. According to this, the CSX railroad trestle had a length of over 2 miles. This is the longest elevated double-track freight line in the world. Interesting. Here's another shot of that big CSX railroad trestle. As you can see, there's a CSX railroad train atop it. Looks like those cars are filled with coal. And this looks like a big youth hangout spot. Alright, this is interesting. This is a bridge that has markers along its length that talk about what happened here in April 1865 when Richmond was being evacuated and the city wound up in flames. As you can see, it has dates and quotes. It is absolutely necessary that we should abandon our position tonight. General Robert E. Lee. Very interesting. Well done. Good work, Richmond. I like this one. You are free, free as air. You can cast off the name of slave and trample upon it. Abraham Lincoln. He visited Richmond, of course. And the slave says, I know that I am free, for I have seen Father Abraham. Here's where I am. See the Css Viaduct, made in 1901, Interstate 95. It shows the 1865 evacuation route. There's a plaque here that gives an interesting story. It says, from this spot you can see the remains of a bridge that marked the beginning of Richmond's role as the capital of the Confederate States of America. On May 29, 1861, President and Mrs. Jefferson Davis came to the city for the first time aboard the Richmond and Petersburg Railroad, crossing the James River over the bridge whose piers can still be seen about 200 yards from here. Further in the distance are the remains of the Richmond and Danville Railroad Bridge, across which Davis and the Confederate government left the city just hours before the Union Army arrived in April 1865. This big skyscraper deserves an explanation. I saw it on a plaque. That is the Federal Reserve Building, and it's a 26-story skyscraper, but apparently something like 50% of the volume is underground, under that level, where there are shooting ranges and various other facilities for federal law enforcement types. Interesting. Okay, this is interesting. I came across a skate park here with all sorts of wonderful urban graffiti. Well, at least I think it's a skate park. I don't know what it is. It reminds me of a skate park like this that was on the south embankment of the Thames in London. And indeed, there were kids skateboarding on it. But this is the Richmond version. Some of the art here isn't too bad for graffiti. I normally don't care for this stuff, but Oh look, it's Wonder Woman. Yeah, this one's pretty artful, I guess. Oh, there are people flung into this target. Interesting. Well, thanks to a vibrant art program at VCU, Richmond is getting to be known as a art city of sorts. And here's some public art. I find what's notable is the stack of chairs up there with the, looks like surgeon gloves hanging there from. I also like those Mexican cards. El Mundo, El Arbo, La Rosa. The world, the tree, the rose. I had a chance to buy some of those when I was in downtown LA, and I didn't. A project of Art 180. That could be VCU. This is the Christopher Newport Cross, and it commemorates when Captain Christopher Newport, John Smith, George Percy, and Gabriel Archer, with gentlemen mariners, soldiers numbering 21, explored James River to the falls and set up a cross. Whitsunday, May 24th, 1607. This monument is presented to the city of Richmond by the Association for the Preservation of Virginia Antiquities, 1907. I've also been seeing a number of these plaques set in the road. This one commemorates the Electric Trolley. In 1888, Richmond built the first commercially successful electric trolley system in the world. The tops of the new cars were connected to an electrical line called a trawler, and thus became known as trolleys. And here's the lock system in the canal. They're restoring some of the buildings here. Always wanted to ride one of those segways. Well, being a sucker for historic places, I saw a sign that said Historic St. John's Church and decided to stop by to see what it was that made it historic. What makes it historic are two things. It is the second oldest continuously attended church in the United States. It was built in 1741. And it was here on the 23rd of March, 1775, that Patrick Henry delivered his famous Liberty or Death speech to the Second Virginia Convention. The grounds are quite nice. Here on Broad Street in Richmond. This is the Chimborazo Visitor Center, part of the Richmond National Battlefield Park. It's a medical museum. I'm going to be touring there, but I couldn't help but notice this. I'm primarily here for Civil War history today, but look at this. The Battle of Bloody Run. Nearby is the site where Chief Totepotomoy of the Pamunkey tribe died in 1656. English colonists had become concerned, called upon Totepotomoy to assist in removing the Ricohawkins, an English force led by Edward Hill, and his men fought the Ricohawkins in 1656. Totepotomoy and many of his men were killed, and the event became known as the Battle of Bloody Run. Wow. 17th century Richmond history. I'm in the museum, and I couldn't help but notice this shirt. It was worn by a hospital nurse, and it's courtesy of the Museum of the Confederacy. I've always gotten a kick out of the pattern, the little cross Confederate flags. It looks really new to me for some reason, but no, it is 150 years old. They also have this great panoramic view of the hospitals in Richmond in 1865, taken by a Brady employee. Big panoramic view of Richmond, really interesting. Give me your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The Statue of Liberty here in Richmond. What is the Statue of Liberty doing here in Richmond? Well, what it is, it's a 1950 monument that the Boy Scouts of America erected for purposes of their own. But there it is. Right next door to the Chimborazo Medical Museum is a Statue of Liberty. Interesting. This impressive monument in this impressive city is in fact the Confederate Soldiers and Sailors Memorial. It was erected in 1894. Very nice. An obelisk with a Reb infantryman up there on the top. This is an interesting spot where I'm at. This is 29th Street, more or less at the intersection of 29th and Cary. And there's a nice park here, but you get this really nice view atop here. And as it turns out, this view is significant because, as this plaque indicates, it's the view that named the city. The curve of the James River and steep slope on this side are very much like the features of the River Thames in England at a royal village west of London called Richmond upon Thames. William Byrd II, an important planner, merchant, politician, and writer, was asked by the House of Burgesses to plan a town at the Falls of the James in the early 1730s. As he had traveled several times to Richmond upon Thames, it is believed that the view led him to name this new town Richmond. I guess that's a shot of Richmond in England, Richmond upon Thames, that reminded him of home. You have a beautiful view of Richmond here. There's the James River from atop this hill. They're taking a lot of these old buildings and warehouses formerly and turning them into apartments here, I know. It's the I-95. There's the Lucky Strike chimney. It's interesting. Bit of cigarette history, tobacco history. And down that way, you get a really good view of downtown Richmond. I'm about 10 miles south of Richmond, downtown Richmond, and this is one of those places that I've read about in Civil War books, but I have never been to. Drewry Bluff. Why was it important? Well, because in 1862, according to this, in May 1862, retreating Confederates abandoned Norfolk, destroyed their only ironclad. The James River was now open to the U.S. Navy. 5 well-armed ships, including the ironclads Galena and Monitor, ascended the James River. Their mission, shell Richmond into submission. The city's fate rested with 300 or 400 Southern troops manning the large cannon at the small earthen fort just 7 miles south of the capital, Drewry Bluff. And here's a photograph taken in 1865 from the 90-foot bluff above the James River. There's one of the heavy Confederate artillery. So, let's take the trail to the fort, shall we? This is it, Drewry Bluff. May 15th, 1862, according to a plaque. When Federal gunboats rounded the distant bend in the James, they entered a shooting gallery. Confederate soldiers and Marines, that's right, Marines, along the riverbanks raked the decks with musket fire. Confederate guns here in the fort opened fire. The USS Galena could not drive through them, so it swung broadside in the channel. What happened then? For 4 hours, the Galena and her crew absorbed a relentless pounding from the Confederate gunners before retreating. Of the 164 officers and men aboard, 27 fell killed or wounded. Southern forces only suffered 15 casualties. The first attempt to take Richmond by river failed, and never again would the U.S. Navy challenge the guns of Drewry Bluff. Dun, 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 dun. Get my shadow out of the image there. Here's one of the cannon that stopped the U.S. Navy dead in their tracks at Drewry Bluff. Boom. Bam. Go no further. Oh, number 66. Well, that's it. I'm done today with Richmond. Well, that is to say, I'm heading up to Richmond for dinner. I think I'm going to go to a place called the Can Can on Carey Street. It's really good. But anyway, hope you've enjoyed this trip to Richmond. Bye.
If you put them two together, you get large.
And any trip in Virginia, going up 95 from Richmond, should culminate in a visit to Carl's. Carl's has got this great ice cream. Actually, it's frozen custard. And it's made on old machines, electro-freeze machines. It was featured on a Rick Seaback documentary once. Check it out, electro-freeze.